if you get into something that you're passionate about and it's meaningful to you, the avenue to make money will sort of reveal itself a lot of the time.
Happy that you reached out to have this conversation. I think it's awesome how aligned we are on the journey of, like, you know, going through a rough period and then using that now for good to come back and help people. You know, looking a little bit at what you're doing with, you got like 5 set pillars that you work on, right?
Yes.
Cool. So I'm excited for this conversation. I think, again, there'll be a lot of alignment, but for the sake of this conversation, if you would, kind of give me a little bit of a background as to kind of how you got started with that, where you kind of came from, what life was like before that, and where we are now.
Sure. So it's me and my wife, and we've been married about almost 15 years, and we've been together almost 20. And we have a 12-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter. And we live in East Texas on what I call a small farm. And so we try to live just a relatively simple life, and which is increasingly difficult because we have a couple of dogs and several cats and a couple of horses, a couple of mules, and a very demanding chicken. And so it means that simplicity is more of a goal than reality. But before all this, I was a corporate graphic designer. And so I had worked in graphic design and marketing departments for almost 20 years. And 2020, I got laid off, and I didn't see it coming. And the COVID kind of, it hadn't exploded yet. It just started. And so it was affecting the industry I was in, but no one quite knew or understood why. And so I got laid off and thought I'd have another job in a couple of weeks, maybe a month, no problem, and get right back on, what now I consider sort of the hamster wheel, But at that point, maybe a week or two later, that was the point where Tom Hanks went into isolation and the NBA season stopped and just everything stopped. And, then it was the 2-week shutdown that turned into longer and all of that. And so suddenly there were no jobs. No one was calling me. There were no interviews. There were no job postings. So I sort of realized in the moment that this was going to be a long-term thing and a chance for me to kind of reset. And that's really where it all started. And I had this opportunity. I knew I had this opportunity basically to be with my family in a way that almost no one gets for a long period of time. And so I made the most of it. I started doing things that, I hadn't ever, I had the opportunity, more like I never even thought of I could do. And so I was, suddenly I was playing video games with my kid and playing, hanging out with my brother, doing woodwork with my dad, all these things, like I said, I'd never even considered. And that went on for, like basically a year until I got another job.
So what was that other job that you transitioned to after that?
Well, I eventually got another graphic design position. And when I got that position, I'd built this life that I really liked, and I wanted to keep as much of that as I could. And so I actually told my employer, I was like, look, this doesn't say this in the job description, but I'm only going to take this job if it's a hybrid position. So I can come in, I can work 20 hours in the office. I'll work the other 20 hours at home. But if it's a deal breaker, I understand, but this is where I'm at. And they were accepted. They were fine with that. And I worked that job for 2.5 years and eventually left and started doing what I'm doing now. But during that time, I worked in the mornings. About after lunch, about 1:00, I came home. and I was there, if my wife needed me to pick the kids up, if somebody needed to go to a doctor's appointment, I could do all those things. I could make the hours up later in the day. And it was, like I said, things I'd never considered before something like COVID, and that whole year of me being present in a way I'd never been before.
Right. So then I guess it's basically fair to say that that process of being home gave you a gave you a taste of what that life could look like, where you didn't want to go back to, the regular kind of 9 to 5 where you're missing out on hanging out with your kids, playing video games or woodworking, whatever that might be.
Right. Exactly. It gave me this idea that I never, it wasn't like I'm missing out on this. I didn't know this was a thing I could have in the first place. So I never even considered it as missing out, if that makes sense. Like,
right.
And so that's kind of how and it was a thing that I realized in the moment. Once I realized I wasn't that the jobs weren't coming, I was like, I can use this opportunity to sort of reset everything and focus on my wife, my kids, my family in a way that was never really possible before.
Right. So then how does that transition from just you deciding, hey, I really like this being with my family thing? How do you transition from that into, all right, cool, now I have to go help other people do the same thing?
Well, I didn't consider that at all at first. Like, I got a new job, did the hybrid thing, and then I eventually, like I said, I left that and started my own business. And during that, I have these, and it's not uncommon, I have these things where for a couple of days, a week, maybe at a time, I wake up at some odd hour. Like, mine was 3:00 in the morning. I'd wake up and couldn't sleep. And so one of these nights I'm wandering around, I'm in the kitchen, and I'm, getting a drink of water or something. And I see my computer screen glowing in the room next to me. And so I go over there and sit down, and I just get this idea that I'm going to open a Google Doc and just write this stream of consciousness, like everything that's on my mind, like a brain dump kind of thing. And I'm like, maybe that's what's keeping me up, is maybe there's something I'm anxious about that I just don't know. And if I sort of get out of my own way and just write something, maybe I'll figure it out. And so that's what I did for about 15 minutes. I just wrote a big thing, just like a journal almost. And when I finished, there was one line that jumped out at me that said, I've been doing graphic design for 20 years, and I'd really like to do something different. I'd like to do something that helped people. And that wasn't even something I'd ever thought about. So I was like, what does that even mean? Like, what can I do to help people? And so that's sort of the genesis of it. And I thought, I'll do an online course. That's what I thought. I'll do a goal setting online, because I was really into that sort of, journaling, or I have this journal planner that I was really into, and setting goals, and like monthly goals, quarterly goals, yearly goals. It's like, I'll focus on that, and I'll make a course about that. And the more I got into it, the more I realized I had a lot more than like an idea about courses. I had a whole thing that eventually turned into Campfire Gentleman. But as I started working on it, I just started reflecting back on all this my pre-COVID life and everything after that, and it was an obvious change at the point of COVID. And I was like, so what did I do differently, and what have I brought forward from that, and how can I distill that down into something people would like to read and could learn something from. And so that's how it all kind of came together.
That's awesome. So then just once you kind of had that idea that I guess you probably had subconsciously, but really never verbalized to yourself. So once that came out and you decided, hey, I'm going to start doing this thing, like, what was your initial effort look like? Did you start to get some traction immediately? Describe a little bit more of that process for kind of how you start to roll that thing out.
Sure. I started it had I don't know the exact date, but it had to be probably late November, early December. The kids happened to be out of school, I remember, and so it was probably around Thanksgiving. And I see I poured a lot into this idea of a course. I realized that wasn't kind of how I wanted to go, and so sometime early this year, I figured out this. I want to make this an email newsletter, a blog type thing, and there was an email newsletter that I really liked, and it sort of shifted to a much more corporate idea. And I was getting something out of this newsletter, and now it's kind of left me. Maybe there's a spot there. You know, there had to be other people that felt that way. So I was like, I can fill in that gap for people like me. And so that's sort of how it all, that's sort of the people I'm speaking to, or I mean, obviously, people like me. So, uh,
Hmm.
and so that's when I started working, distilling these ideas down. And that's where I came up with family and purpose and growth, health and simplicity. Is originally I had this big complicated, almost pyramid shaped idea. And I was like, this is way too complicated. And as the more I looked at them, the more I realized these can all be boiled down into 5 things that are much simpler for people to digest, much more to the point, and gives people room to fill in how they want to do it themselves, with not me just telling what I think they should do, but give them room to do it how they would like. And so, and that was February or so. Like January, February, I started working through this, and really, my plan was to launch it in maybe like August. I was like, I was trying to perfect it, and that's what I was doing. And then I never read it before. I read the War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. As I read that, I was like, I'm just, using this is procrastination. This is ready now. And so my plan was to launch it at that point. I was like, I can do this in March, but after working through it, ended up being April, but April is when I launched it. And I basically spent a month advertising it, building it up, then released the first newsletter in May, the 5th of May.
That's awesome. So really what I'm hearing, like the common theme among pretty much all this, is you really kind of got out of your own way and just made an effort and continued to revise.
Yes.
Like, I think that's the kind of the current theme here. Is this wasn't some amazingly well thought out, and I don't want to diminish it in any way, but this wasn't like this amazingly well thought out thing that you had a business plan for 15 years and said, hey, I'm going to go out and do this thing. It was, you took a chance on yourself, decided to say, hey, I'm going to go all in and do this. And now you're out there making an impact, whether that's 1 people or 100 people or 1,000, right? You got to start with that first one. So, I think the moral of everything you shared thus far, as I'm hearing it, I'd love to kind of hear your feedback, but it's really about, hey, if you feel called to go do a thing, just take the first step. Like, go out and do whatever it is that you feel called to do. Obviously if it's a good thing and going to help people, please do that. But yeah, just if you feel called, go out and do the thing. And so long as you're putting your authentic personality into it and genuinely helping people do the right thing and improve, it's almost guaranteed to succeed at some way, shape, or form. Do I hear that right?
Oh yeah. And after you start something, you end up looking back and being like, the signs were kind of there already if I would have paid attention, type thing, and so I remember a conversation with my wife where a company I worked at, one of their kind of the owner's pet projects was like a self-development thing, and it was in the same marketing department I worked in, so we worked on a lot of the same that material. And I would tell my wife, I'd be like, yeah, he should really do this, or he should really do that, or I'd see something on Instagram or whatever and be like, or this guy he's missing this thing. And my wife said, well, if you can do it so well, why don't you just do it instead of complaining about how everybody else does it? And that was 6 months before I started this. That was another sign that I was there already that I didn't pick up on. And so, like I said, looking back, you're like, there were all these signs, all these signposts that told me to go this direction. But yes, it was something that I guess had been on my mind or my heart for a while. And like you said, it took me getting out of my own way and just doing it that really made the difference.
Now, is that something that you see as a common thread among men who are like in that season of struggle where they can't necessarily get out of their own way? They feel called to do something other than, the traditional 9 to 5, where they have a feeling, but they can't necessarily take that first step. Do you see that same thing happen?
Oh, sure. And there's so many, it's one of those things that always makes sense. Like I just said, after the fact, you see the signposts. There's so many obvious examples that you can do something differently than the 9 to 5 and be satisfied, be content and make enough money and all of those things. But it's just, there's a system that's already there that you get stuck in. And if there's not a way, like COVID was my wake up call, and I wouldn't guarantee if that didn't happen, I would have ever woken up. And so you definitely get stuck in this rut that sometimes you need a wake up call to get out of. And I'm hoping that I can be that wake up call for some people that, if you don't feel like you belong in this 9 to 5, you don't have to. It's not even the cultural expectation I think it used to be at this point. And so a lot of that expectation is just, yourself and not the people around you or this, the system almost. It's this thing you've built up and you feel trapped in sometimes. And a lot of times, there's not if you get out of that, the path isn't as clear. And so that can be scary. And so I think that's a lot of it too.
So then let's talk about that step, right? So let's say you take the first step and you decide like, hey, I'm unhappy with where I'm at right now, and I'm committing to take some level of action. And you've taken that first step, and now you're at the spot where everything is unsettled. You're not sure, what to do next. What does that person's next move usually look like?
That's a good question. Well, the first thing is, it just happened to me. It happened to me because I started a new business, and this wasn't something I expected when I started the new business. So the first thing I would say is, of course, don't quit your job when you're going through this. You're trying to figure out what to do next. And so always keep that job as a transition. And if it's something you're super passionate about, you'll devote that time to it. If it's something that means something to you, you'll find time to work on that and build it up, and it eventually transition to it. But once you, like you said, have taken that step, I would say don't be afraid to take a part-time position while you sort of do both. And so the financial burden isn't quite as heavy. And so spread that out. And, and there's so many, like you said, the gig economy type thing. There's a lot of ways you can sort of supplement that income as it transitions from one to the other. And so and there's so many, like I said, I didn't get in. Not like I've made any money really, but I didn't get in to make money. I had no idea of that you would make money, that you could make money off email newsletters, or eventually it could move into coaching and things. I had no idea about any of that. This was something I was super passionate about and just sort of felt called to do. And maybe that's a lot of the realization is, if you get into something that you're passionate about and it's meaningful to you, the avenue to make money will sort of reveal itself a lot of the time.
Yeah, It's a good point. I think that's a stumbling block I see often for people is they worry so much about the entire plan, like trying
Mm-hmm.
to understand all the moving pieces first before taking the first step. And I would tend to agree. I think there are a lot of examples where, you go out and you just start taking that first step, start taking some level of action, and you may never see the entire staircase, right? But you're always going to see that next step. Where should I go next? And it could be a scary place, for someone who's got a lot of experience working in, another situation where they maybe have nothing's obviously ever guaranteed, right? But they have the illusion of some level of safety and comfort in their position because, obviously, as you know, you could lose your job at any point in time. But, they have this illusion of, all right, cool, I have a plan in place. I know I can work here for the next 15 years. I'll have a retirement, blah, blah, blah. But none of that stuff is guaranteed, right? And I think for a lot of people, they stay stuck in that situation because it feels comfortable in the moment, even though it's legitimately just as risky as taking a bet on yourself and going out there and doing something that you feel called to do. Do you see it the same way?
Yes. And what I've noticed is you will, in sort of the 9 to 5 corporate environment, you will find people that love that. Like I said, there were people that I have a buddy that he worked. I mean, it's everyone here. It's the job everyone here wants, uh, and people love it. It pays for what they do on the weekends. It pays for their college, their kids' college tuition. It's just a job to them. They don't need to find any meaning in it. But he feels trapped and drives him crazy. And I've got another friend same way. He works at in finance, and it's just a job to fund the things he wants to do with his kids and his wife, and to pay for his car and his house, and he couldn't be happier. But other people there, they're like they feel, and so you can feel like I'm the weird one here who doesn't love this thing, and no one ever tell you that's okay. You don't have to stay there and do that.
Yeah. No, I think you make a good point there because there are so many people who just live by that, whatever the social norm is.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they think that they have to do. Hey, that's maybe what they saw their parents do, or that's what their friends do. So they do it because they want to fit in and they don't want to be, hey, what's up with John? He's a weird guy. He decided to take a bet on himself and look at him now. It reminds me of this saying I heard the other day. I'd rather be cringe in your mind than caged in mine.
That's great. Yes.
And I think that's a very big part of that is that so many people stay stuck in their own head because they're afraid of other people's opinions, right? Someone's going to judge them for doing something weird or different from what they're used to doing. But how often do you see them literally sacrificing everything that's possible for them because they're afraid to take that first step?
And the thing I've noticed is when I did that, I'm if it comes across here, I'm sure it does, but I'm like very introverted. And so I was very worried about what people would think when I started posting this on social media, because I don't really post much on social media anyway. And so when I started doing this and adding this to like my LinkedIn profile or whatever, I was like, oh my gosh, what are people going to think? And no one cared. Like no, like this, uh, and so I don't think people notice until or care until sort of it's large enough for people to notice and care. And once that happens, you kind of won already. Yeah, and so like that's what I noticed. It's just everyone is either encouraging or really paid no attention. So
Yeah. And I think that there's a part of that too, where you start to realize that the people who are silently judging you are no happier in their own lives. They're usually just taking it out on you because they're so unhappy with what they're doing. They don't want to see you happy and successful because then it means that they really lost and they have to do something. I think that once you get that understanding in your head, it's freeing a little bit, right? Like it takes the sting out of that criticism and judgment because you're going to get it regardless. Even though it doesn't mean anything, it doesn't carry the same weight. Right? I think it's still, even times for me, I'll go through these periods where you get criticism and judgment from other people, and you look around, you're like, nothing I'm doing is negatively affecting your life in any way. But if you want to cast judgment on me for how I live my life and what I'm doing because it makes you feel weird in yours, all right, cool. Like, if that makes you feel better, it is what it is. But, it's this thing that doesn't ever really go away. And I think as you, kind of walk that out, you start to get a little bit deeper of an understanding of kind of how the game mechanics work. And it just makes it easier to continue to go down that path.
Yes. And you realize a lot of those people are people like you were, where you didn't fit in and you didn't feel like this was for you, and you got out. And so they're looking back, hoping jealous isn't the right word. Maybe they're envious that they feel like you found the map kind of, and they didn't. And the truth is there really isn't one. You just have to, like you said, bet on yourself and trust that you'll figure it out. For one thing, that's like you said, that you'll figure it out. The path will reveal itself one step at a time, occasionally 2 steps at a time. And you have to be comfortable in that uncertainty, which means you have to have a little bit of confidence in yourself too.
Right. Which I think could be hard for a lot of people, especially if they don't have someone around them who's kind of walking that out. Right. So is that a thing that you see a lot, where people really just need that picture of possibility for them? Like, they see someone else living that life and they know that it's possible. And then once it's possible for you, it's possible for me, it's possible for them too.
There's definitely people that need that sort of example, like I said, the kind of map out in front of them. And some people just don't have the confidence to take the leap into something that's less secure than what they're doing, and all the encouragement and all the direction in the world won't help them, because so they have to build that confidence in themselves. But there's a ton of people, sure, that just need some obvious sign that it's possible, and then they can take that leap.
Yeah. So let's say now the person listening to this podcast right now feels that pull, right? They feel that desire to do something different than they're doing right now. They feel the conviction that, like, all right, cool, I'm going to take some decisive action to change my life. What does that first step look like for them that they can do, like, literally right now?
What I would do is what I did, just start writing, and write what you're thinking, what your feelings are about it. Because a lot of times you can get locked into some idea, because I think your mind is always kind of looking for that security. So that, like I said, my immediate thing was, I'll do a online course. And that's obviously not where I ended up, but I didn't end up there because I just kept working on it. It's so I would start by, like I said, just writing and thinking and spending time kind of not as much deciding what you want to do as discovering the possibilities before you even start. Because and then make room for that to change as you go. But the first thing I would do is just think, and write as much ideas down as you can. Because I just don't think that most people understand how big the options are, even within a specific area almost.
Yeah. I think it's a really low pressure thing that they can do, right? There's no big commitment. You don't have to go on stage and speak to anybody. You don't have to go quit your job. But, like, literally just you and you with a notepad, with the notes app on your phone, just kind of writing down what you're feeling, what your desires are, what your dreams are, where you're at right now. And I think, like you said, once you start verbalizing all of that and putting pen to paper, it helps you see even just the next step a little bit more clear. And even if that's, hey, where am I at right now and what are the things that I need to change, it helps you at least have something to focus on. So yeah, I think that's a great first step. Beyond that, right now, let's say we've identified something to go from there. Do I need some level of coach? Do I need a mentor? Do I need a course? Like, what is it that I need aside from just a commitment to really make that change, like meaningful change?
I don't think you, at some point, you need those things, whether it's an actual coach, or it's an actual mentor, or it's someone that you see doing it online in a book that you've read, as some sort of model that you can essentially model your idea after and then develop it into your own thing. And so I wouldn't necessarily say you needed a coach or a mentor in the traditional sense, but you might. It depends on your level of comfortability once you sort of get into it. Uh, and for me, for instance, I had written before for a digital magazine for a little bit, and while I was their art director, and I wrote 6 or 8 stories, and so I knew I liked writing. And the part I didn't like about the online course thing was sort of the talking and the video, and me, I could make the slides, I could make them look pretty, I had the ideas, but I really didn't like the idea of recording these videos and me talking the whole time. I felt really uncomfortable with that. And I was like, is there a way around? And I worked really hard to get around that before I realized this isn't what I want to do. And so then I actually found some mentors, some ideas, some newsletters that I liked, and explored the possibilities there. And so I definitely think there's room for, and some people do need, mentors and coaching, especially if it's sort of out of their area altogether. You can find some things you're passionate about and that's really meaningful in your life, that's still well within what your comfortability, in the corporate world was.
Right.
And so nothing wrong with
Yeah,
a
that
coach
makes
or
sense.
mentor.
And I think, to add on to that, I'm a big advocate of having a mentor,
Mm-hmm.
someone that is a step ahead of you, someone to help kind of give you the grace and space you need. But I don't know that it's necessary, day one. I think what is necessary, though, is having somebody to kind of make you feel loved, appreciated, seen, and heard. And that doesn't have to be a coach or a mentor. That could be your high school buddy, could be your spouse, could be whatever. But I do think that, having someone to listen to and someone to vent to and kind of that shoulder to lean on makes this way easier. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And I have a really good friend that I have, we have a regular coffee date once a month, and we talk, and we text all the time. We, we probably see each other 4 or 5 times a month, but we have one specific, day a month that we go and we just sit and we talk for, it ends up being hours, 4 or 5 hours sometimes, and have coffee. And he's very supportive, and he's sort of my sounding board. And he's kind of he's a couple years older than me, but he's kind of the same. He's got 2 kids. He's kind of living the same kind of life, the same, we're kind of, and so he's very much in it with me, and he's a very good sounding board. And then when you're talking about mentors, I think about, it isn't like you have to have the perfect mentor either. Like, you can take the pieces that help you from, especially if you're sort of taking it from a mentor, just like not a, what do you call it? Professional relationship mentor, just some person you're observing on LinkedIn or Instagram, or you're subscribed to their newsletter, and they give you ideas. Like, you can take the good that resonates with you from them and not have to emulate everything that they do also. And so you kind of curate the best, or what works for you, from mentors and coaches. And that's how I would do it. It's just, don't feel like the you have to follow the exact path that that person took, the exact advice your coach gives you, but take what works for you. And I'm sure most of them will tell you the same thing. That what works for you, take it. What doesn't, forget about it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's legitimately that simple. And, I think people tend to overcomplicate that often, where it's like, hey, this thing really works for me. Cool. Do more of that. This thing doesn't work for me. All right, cool. Do less of that. And it's legitimately that simple. Right. And that's why sometimes the courses get a little funky, because you're giving everyone, universal set of instructions that just doesn't always work. And so I think, keeping it as simple as, hey, this works, do more of that, is honestly probably the best advice most people can really ever follow. But I want to thank you for this conversation. Where can people learn more about your program and you?
Sure. You can find everything at campfiregentleman.com. That'll take you to the Beehive newsletter that you can sign up for there, and that's where all my socials are. That's a blog as well. Launching a coaching program in the next month or two, and you'll be able to read all about it there as well. And so yeah, that's where you can find me. And
Awesome.
hopefully you can find me on YouTube at some point soon, and all my socials and all that. So
perfect. Well, I look forward to it. And again, I just want to thank you for your time and for doing what you do. It's a good thing you bet on yourself, because now there's a bunch of people who are happier in their own lives because you decided to be happy in yours. So again, thank you for doing that.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.